If you are somebody who has been feeling frustrated and dissatisfied in the bedroom, like you're having mediocre or bad sex, and you know that there is a better reality out there for you, then today's podcast is for you because I'm going to share the principles that you must know to make having bad sex a thing of the past and to invite in and intentionally create connected, juicy, sensual experiences that are even better than anything that you have been fantasizing about. So if that sounds like something you'd like in your life, listen up because this podcast is for you. And the truth is that bad sex is at an all-time high. And I was doing some research for this show and I read some statistics that absolutely shocked me. And one survey showed that millennials are having really bad sex, with more than a third of sexually active millennials reporting that they're having bad or no sex, and 44% of women in that same category reporting the same. So what is happening? What is this disconnect that is happening as a culture? Why are so many people having bad sex? And what can we do to start having really, really good sex, right? These are the questions that I'm going to answer in today's podcast. Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Amaya Shiva. I am a sex and intimacy coach, and I help conscious men and women go from having disconnected, frustrating, or even no sex to having connected, beautiful, sacred sexual experiences, because truly, or intimacy is one of the four aims of human life, and it is a really important pillar for health and happiness. So, why is it that so many people are having terrible sex, and what can you do to amplify your sex life and intimacy so that you leave the bedroom happy or wherever it is that you're having sex? I can tell you on a personal level that I also struggled with this problem, and now I know why I was having it. But it took me about 20 years of being sexually active to figure out what needs to be in place to have a really great sexual experience. And I'm super excited to share those principles with you today because I've studied many varieties of sexuality and tried them out myself. Like, I have studied with celibate monks, and I've also studied with world famous dominatrixes. Listen up because these lessons are juicy. I dropped a statistic of 44% of millennial women having really bad sex and about 33% of men in that same category. And in my opinion, there is one simple principle that could alleviate 98% of that, right? And it's also one of the most important principles you need to understand if you want great, connected, sacred sex to be a part of your romantic and intimate life. And that is only have sex when you are truly ready. And when I say only have sex when you are truly ready, I mean on all levels. Obviously, physical arousal is very important, but so is emotional safety, and so is a feeling of spiritual connection. And in my experience, bad sex happens when you're not connected on one of those levels, right? I mean, if you're not aroused, for sure, you're going to have bad sex. If you're not emotionally connected with someone, it's going to really limit the depth of the experience you can have. And if you're not spiritual, if you don't understand just how sacred and special the act of sex is, you're missing something very powerful, because this is the portal for life on earth, right? This is the universe recreating itself through pleasure, through connection. And if that's not sacred, I don't know what is. So the number one principle you need to remember is that you get to be fully aroused, connected, and turned on before having sex. Like you should really, really want it. Like your whole body should be a full fuck yes. And if it's not, this leads me perfectly into principle number 2. You get to communicate that. And you should be communicating your arousal. But principle number 2, to consistently have powerful sexual experiences, is you got to be using your words, right? You got to talk about what you like and what you don't. Have you ever gone to get a massage and it was terrible? Like the person they were just like not doing it right. You know, it was too light or too hard or it hurt. It was cold in the room. And instead of speaking up, you just sat there and suffered in silence and then decided you were never going to go back. Yeah, don't do that. It's really important that you practice giving feedback and receiving feedback and telling people immediately when something doesn't feel good or right and doing it in a kind way. Like, don't be like, oh God, that sucks. Why are you doing that? You know, that's not going to make anybody feel good. But you also want to make sure that you share if something feels off for you, because that is also how you let people know when something feels really on and good, right? It's through your words. You know, I remember when I first started to put these principles into practice in my own life. I had gone to a party and there was a guy there who I thought was so hot. You know, we started to make out and I realized very quickly that actually we didn't have the kind of spark I thought. Like his pheromones weren't matching mine in a way that felt good. And I was very quickly like, ooh, no. You know, there was a time in my life where I would have just kind of like silently suffered through it or whatever, you know, let it go on for a long time. But instead of doing that, I stopped and I was like, hey, I appreciate this encounter so much. I'm feeling complete right now. And you know what's dope is that guy was actually also having the same experience. And he was also really relieved that I spoke into it and said something. We talked about it after and we were both like, yeah, that wasn't working that well. Like, you know, physically you look great, but we just didn't have that spark. And so as we talked about it, you know, we checked in and got clear on what our level of attunement was. We realized that making out wasn't for us. And that could have only happened through communication and through that first principle I was sharing, which is like really paying attention to what your body is asking for and desiring. So have conversations. And if you need a framework to have a conversation, I've got another episode that is all about this. It's episode number 2 in my series that's going to teach you exactly what to do and say so that you're fully aligned with your partners. Let's move on to principle number 3. And that is to remember orgasm is not the goal. Seriously. And I say this because men and women both feel pressure that orgasm has to be a part of sex because that's what we've been conditioned to do. That's what we've seen in Hollywood movies. There's a subtle narrative that you are responsible for someone else's pleasure. For the longest time, I really thought that my partners had to ejaculate. I really thought that my partners had to have an orgasm in order for the experience to be complete. And because if they didn't, I would make it mean that something was wrong with me, that I'm not that attractive. And it actually stressed me out. And thinking that way gave me the attitude and mindset that I wanted to hurry up and like make sure they had an orgasm because then I could kind of like calm down and relax and not worry about that part. Because once that part was completed, well, damn it, then I knew it was a successful sexual experience, right? And that's total garbage. Like that's a totally wrong way of thinking. And it takes you out of the moment and out of pleasure. Last partner that I had encounters with, thankfully, has the same vocabulary. And it was so beautiful because we were talking about that and we made sure to have the conversation that that isn't the goal, that he didn't need that to happen for him, for it to be a deeply connected, satisfying experience. And I also didn't have to have that for me. Because, for I don't know how many women out there, raise your hand if that's you, have not had an orgasm from sex, right? And I'm also curious how many men out there feel like you have been taught and conditioned that you have to have an orgasm in order for sex to be complete. Right? So I want to help you rewrite that narrative and take some pressure off, because you don't actually need that, right? And it's so much more important to, in my opinion, go slow and figure out these different ways of being in turn on and being in connection, right? And if you look at any tantric text, it's like they're teaching you techniques to have full body pleasure, and you can have spiritual experiences when you approach sex like this without an end goal. Okay. So this brings me to number 4. Again, this is one of my favorite principles, and I talk about it a lot because it changed my sex life so much. And I realized that I had been walking around for years carrying so much fear and pressure around my looks, how my body impacts other people. And for years, and I'm not alone in this, I subtly carried a fear and belief that if I turned someone else on, I was responsible for their pleasure. So I had really disconnected from my own pleasure in a number of ways. Like, first I was like, oh, well, I have to make the man come, in order for sex to be good. And then my other illusion was that I'm responsible if I turn someone else on. So I better be careful, right? I better be careful about who I turn on. And what I was doing when I was thinking that way and living in that mindset is that I completely abandoned my own pleasure and my own desires. I didn't even know what they were. Like, that took me until like 36 to figure out because I was living and thinking this way. So principle number 4 is you get to become fully responsible for your turn on instead of focusing on someone else's. And honestly, the best way to turn someone else on who is attracted to you is by being in your own turn on, right? This is the principle of mirror neurons. And this also means that you get to speak up when you don't like something, as we've already said, and give juicy feedback when you do. Like, let your partners know that you're enjoying the experience. Nobody's psychic. Maybe they are, but they've lost touch. Whatever it is, use your words and be clear, right? And when this happens, you're going to notice that your sex life completely transforms. Like, I was working with a amazing woman who's married, and we went over these principles, and she was sharing an experience she had where all of a sudden, when she quit worrying about what her husband was thinking and feeling, she was like, Amaya, I can't believe it. I am literally having the best orgasms I've had in my whole life. And I'm not scared to say what I want and ask for what I want. And I'm not scared of, possibly hurting my husband's feelings. Because on the other side of that, that's where bliss and depth and deep, deep, deep connected sacred sex happen. And in a culture that has conditioned us in so many ways, especially as women, that, it's interesting, like we're massively advertised and marketed to on how to make ourselves appealing for other people. But nobody teaches you how to make yourself feel appealing for yourself. Very few people are out there teaching you how to communicate your desires and your pleasure, especially as a woman. Like, you're being taught how to make yourself more desirable and more pleasurable for someone else. But what about for you? And And often this is a radical shift for women and for men, because it means you got to get super clear on the ways in which you have ignored what your body is saying. And you get to tune back in to your yes, into that full body pleasure experience that can only come from full relaxation and listening to your intuition. Because the body remembers what the mind forgets. And when you bypass your body's cues and signals, it stops trusting you and it stops doing the things that you want it to because it doesn't think you're safe. So you need to become fully safe for your own body by becoming fully responsible for your turn on. Amen. And this brings me to the last principle I want to talk about today, which is a really big one. And a really important one in a culture that fetishizes youth, that fetishizes a certain body type for men and women, and that sells us airbrushed images of a very small percentage of the population as being sexy and appealing. And that's so detrimental that that's happening to us, but there's also a tremendous opportunity there in that you get to let go of needing to look a certain way in order to give and receive sexual pleasure. I hope that you heard that. One of the biggest blocks to having great sex is being self-conscious and ashamed of how your body looks, of how it smells, of how it tastes, of the faces that you make, of the sounds that come out. And the fact is, these are natural and part of sex, but we are being sold versions of sex that are not real through Hollywood and the media. Most people are missing level 1 sex education, which used to be a part of everybody's human experience, right? Because we lived in a tribal culture for many years where you would see people having sex like this is what you do. People have sex. Hi, that's how I was created, and that's how most of you listening were created. Maybe there's somebody that's IVF now, but for most of human history, that was it. That was sex, right? Sex is how you procreated. Porn has played a huge role in tricking people and in making them think sex is only like this and it only looks like this and it should only feel like that. And this is the kind of penis and this is the kind of labia. These are the kind of tits that you need to have in order to be worthy of a hot sexual experience. I'm telling you that that's not true. I went through this phase when I moved to Austin where it was really like the first time I've been truly single as an adult and in a conscious way. And when I got here, there are so many good looking men. And what I mean by that, like a very athletic, model kind of standard. And I went on a lot of dates with men who took a lot of care and put a lot of time into their body. But the truth is the men that I actually had really great experiences with and wanted to keep meeting and dating were the ones who put care and time into our connection and asking me how I was feeling and sharing with me how they were feeling. When I let go of thinking that I had to have a 6-pack and so did my partner in order for us to be sexy, my God, everything changed. And, I'm an energetic, sensual blueprint for sex. So for me anyways, like it's about the energetic merge, right? It's about communion with another person. This is what creates satisfying sex for me. And in order to really have that, you have to let go of that body shame. And I have some really powerful exercises I take my clients through to help you heal body shame. So these are my 5 principles that you need to know. And I'm going to recap them for you very quickly because I want it to stick in your mind. Number 1, Only have sex when you are fully ready. Number 2, communicate your needs, your desires, your boundaries, all of those things. Number 3, stop making orgasm the goal and start making connection and attunement the priority. Number 4, become fully responsible and connected to your turn on. And number 5, love your body the way it is. If this was valuable to you, I would love it if you could go and give me a 5-star rating and share it with your friends. And if you'd like to give me feedback, you can reach out to me personally on Instagram. Or if you are looking for support on this path, you can find out more information about working with me on my website, amayashiva.com. There are a few options I have available. I would love to support you in your journey of higher consciousness around sex and sensuality. So if this is you, whether you're single or in partnership, and you want to upgrade your communication codes and your Eros codes, and you want to feel really good and connected and in your sacred when you're having sex, reach out and we can get started. Sending you so much love and light until we meet again.